Before we dive deeper into the software UI, I just want to point out that you can import your saved data on the previous version. So if you created a lot of scenes that are saved in on the older version, you imported media files onto the global folder, you can easily just get access to those just by backing up your stuff from the previous version and importing them onto this one. And so what you want to do is go onto the older version, and when you start the application, all you got to do is simply just go onto the settings panel right there. Look on the right side where it says the migration tool. That's what you want to do, is export your saved data. And again, this is going to be a file, a copy of your saved scenes, your global media files, and custom fonts if you imported ones. So what you want to do, click on the export button, and it's going to give you a pop-up screen to, ask you basically where you want to save this on your computer. Once you're done that, you just, you go back onto the new version, and same thing. You're going to go onto the settings panel right there, still on the right side, migration tool, click on import, and yes, proceed, find out where you stored the file, double click it, and then it's going to load up, and that's basically it. And then as soon as you get into or start a new project, you go on into My Scenes, and you're going to find everything in there. So if you click on My Scenes, you're going to find all the scenes that you have been working on and saved up. And if you open up the media files, go on to Global, as you can see, I've got my stuff in there. It looks, the way the files are or folders are structured just looks different, I know, but at least we got everything that we saved, which is pretty awesome. So that saves me a lot of time and saves me from the hassle of having to worry about not being able to transfer all my files from the older version onto the new one. That is your first step. So let's talk about the interface, because it looks a little different versus the previous one. So one of the new things is the way how the interface is designed. So first of all, we don't have those icons on the top left anymore, where we can grab shapes and icons and stuff like that. No, we now have this plus icon right there that we can just click it, and from there we can add a text. We can get the pen tool as well, which was also another icon that was on the main UI from the inside. We can add a rectangle, circle, triangle, square, and arc. As you can see, they have their own shortcuts right next to each one, so you can easily just click on Shift T, Shift R, P, R, so on and so forth to add any of those tools, like the text, the pen tool, rectangle, to add a shape, right? If you want to do this. So that's one thing. The next thing is right on the top middle of the screen, we now have less buttons. So we only have the selection tool. Right next to it is the hand icon and the magnifying icon that allows you to zoom in or zoom out. But for me, I like to use shortcuts. So when it comes to zooming out the canvas or zooming in, I use the scroll button of my mouse to scroll up to zoom in, scroll down to zoom back out from my canvas. The one thing that we are missing on the top next to these icons is the ruler icon, which is basically the guidelines that you can add onto your canvas. This has now changed from here to here on the bottom right, basically above the timeline. So above the timeline, we have a few buttons here. We've got the grids, which is still the same, but right next to it is now we have the ruler, in which we can add guidelines vertically or horizontally. And then once we're done editing, we could just remove them all, just like we used to. Now, next to that, we have the keyboard shortcuts undo and redo. These are all the same. Nothing really has changed about it. But what's changed is on the top right, we now have a new icon right next to the save button that allows you to choose different layouts of the UI, which is pretty cool because you get more flexibility. And they did this for one reason, and that is in case you're working on a smaller screen. So say you have a laptop that is like 13 inch or 15.6 inch. In that case, you would need to try different layout that fits smaller screens. So it's very convenient to have something like this to be able to change between layouts depending on the size of the screen that you're working on. So we have three options or three different layouts that we could choose from. The minimal one right there, where we don't have anything on the right side, and it's just the left panel with these icons being on the top. And then we have the project, our global, and then stock. And then basically this is where all your media files that you import for the project you're working on. And global is we all know about already. Now, going back onto the layouts, the next one is left bar. What it does, it changes the way how these icons are positioned instead of being on the top to the left side. So it's kind of similar to the previous version, the way they look like on the left side, right next to the left panel. And then you can also click on left and right to have the old UI look of CS Pro, right? Where you have the right panel for different settings, and then resolution that allows you to change the resolution from landscape to vertical, square, and then custom if you want. And the left one where you have the icons on the left side, and then project, global, and stock. What's also changed is the timeline. So now you can change the size of your timeline. So basically, if you look at the bottom right corner, now we have a few new buttons. First of all, this one is fit timeline. That's basically what changes the timeline size. So click that. This one changes the timeline size like this, so that you can see a full left panel. If you have your studio opened up just like this, then it's simply not going to be overlapped by the timeline. So you can make changes to the timeline size. For me, I mean, it really depends on your preference, but for me, I'm used to the old look. So I'd rather just do it that way, where I have my timeline stretch out across the screen, and I don't mind it overlapping the left panel, because I can always scroll through and go through the entire list of the left panel. And I think this is also very convenient, the way you're able to change the timeline size because of different screen sizes as well. That's my thinking, is when you're working with a smaller screen, you can either have a smaller timeline or a stretch out one that is overlapping the left panel. I think everything else is still the same as far as the buttons on the top of the timeline. Everything is basically the same except scenes. When you click on the scenes icon right now, this is what it looks like. It's not like it was that it opens up a pop-up screen with all the scenes that we used to see on the previous version. Now, what we can do is we see this pop-up screen. It looks like you haven't added any scenes to this panel yet. So what we're going to need to do is click on Get Scenes. And that basically opens up the pop-up screen that we used to have on the previous version. And from there, you can just pick up the scenes that you want. So you have them all in different categories. When you look at it, this pop-up also looks different than the previous one. When you go back onto CS Pro and then you try to open up scenes, you're going to find those. And you're also going to find a list of categories on the left side, where it allows you to choose between different categories, and then it gives you a bunch of scenes underneath that. So if I want clay, then I just click on clay, and that basically takes me into all the scenes that have to do with the clay one. Now, if I want to go back, there is this button that says back to categories. So this takes me back to the main menu of the pop-up screen to the rest of the categories, where I could just choose a different category. So if I want to try something maybe like amazing social media hack, click that. Same thing, right? You can see all the scenes that goes under this category. Scroll through and then simply add scenes. So let us add scenes to show you what it looks like when we go back and then find scenes. So in order to add scenes onto that smaller panel that we saw earlier, we're going to need to click on download that scene first and click on add. And what that does is it works differently. What it does is it adds this scene onto the smaller pop-up versus when you used to work on the older version, you click on add scene and it basically gets added to the timeline. But now when you click on close, look at that. It's not on the timeline anymore. It is in this small pop-up. So if you want to add it, you just simply drag and drop it onto your canvas, and then it gets added just like that. And then when you're done, you click on the scenes icon one more time and continue to work on your project. And remember, you can always switch between different aspect ratios. So this is the landscape ones. You can go into vertical ones. You can go with square ones and scroll through. Same thing, right? The design is still the same, where you have to pick up your desired category, go inside it. So for business promo, right, it's going to show you all the square scenes inside the square. You want to go back, there's this simple button that says back to categories. That takes you to the main menu of the pop-up screen. You want to close it out, simply click on the close button right there, and that will close it out for you. So this is how you can add scenes, just for you not to get confused, because I did when I first started using it. They're like, wow, where are the scenes? I clicked on get scenes, this opened up, and I chose a category. I was under the impression that when I click on add scene, this is gonna do what? It's gonna add it onto my timeline. But no, it gets added here first. So it's like a step, another step for you before you start adding it onto the timeline. It is an extra step, but to be honest with you, well, now that I remember, because I was working with one of my students last week, we were about to end the session. So here's what happened. We wanted to choose or pick up some of the scenes that we are going to use in our project that we're creating. And what happened was the session was about to end, so we didn't have that much time. So I said, okay, how about we make our selection for the scenes that we are going to use on this project? And we made our selection already. So we got all the scenes added onto the small pop-up screen. And next time when we met again, we simply just opened up the scenes and then we found all the added scenes in here versus the previous one. You couldn't do that. If you want to allocate some scenes for this specific project, you can have them all here. Yeah, I think it's convenient. So it did save me in that situation, which was pretty cool. Next up, if we look at the publish button, it's also a little different. So when you click on publish now, so they have the new rendering engine by default turned on versus the previous one where it was turned off. And then if you want to try it, you switch it on to start using it. Now, the new engine is the one that is used by default. So if you want to use the old engine, you simply switch that on to go back to the old engine. Now, as you know, the difference between the old engine and the new one, that the new engine has improved a lot in terms of speed. So that's the reason why they have it turned on by default. So that tells us that the new engine is not in beta anymore. And then we also have the HW acceleration, which is also turned on by default. But anything else is still the same as far as video, image, and audio, and the different file formats and everything else is exactly the same. There's nothing really different. As far as the canvas color, the auto save, the editing mode in low and high, and then canvas mode, show and hide while working on your project. And then you have auto compact tracks. I guess this place, it compacts your tracks in the timeline. And when you go into the resolution one, again, this is where you could change between different aspect ratios. You have the size here, but they also give you an addition to social media icons, just help you more. That feature or that option was not there on the previous one. So now if you click on this, it's going to show you what the recommended resolution for Facebook. You go to YouTube, then it's going to show you the recommended qualities for YouTube. So you could choose a 4K, 2K, full HD, or an HD video, right? Same thing with the rest of the icons. So this is very helpful, and that was not there before. So this is one of the new add-ons onto the UI, which is really amazing. As far as the left panel, as you can see, we're under the studio. What you will notice is that there are some of the components available on this menu. And those are the typewriter effect, the progress bar, the carousel. You scroll down, you're gonna find the button, infinite scroll, the spotlight, and number counter, random reveal, and text box. They may have added those for an easy access to any of those components. But you can still go on to the effects tab. And this is another difference that you will notice between this version and the previous version, that under the effects tab, we now have both together intact, which is the effects and components. So under the effects, it's the same list of effects we used to have. Nothing has changed. Components, right? This is the list of our components, or the placement of those. They're now combined up together. And then you have the typical transitions that you can add onto your scenes. And then this is the 3D character creator, our audios, our scenes, studio, and then my files. Let's talk about the timeline, because there are a few changes they also did to improve the timeline experience. One of those things is that you can now add layers onto the timeline exactly where you want. So for example, if I open up my studio, I don't have to have my playhead positioned where I want to add the next layer. If I want to go into my studio, say, open up backgrounds, and then I want to drag this, and then I want to really have it here, for example. See that? This was not part of the previous version. When you have your playhead at the very beginning, normally when you add a new layer onto the timeline or canvas, it gets added to where your playhead was. But now you're more free to add the layers anywhere on the timeline, right? So you can position them on the same layer right next to another one. You could have it, you know, here. You could drag it and drop it anywhere on the timeline. That gives you more freedom to add layers anywhere you want. That did not exist on a previous version. But I realized something that, say for example, I have this layer at the bottom here, like I have so many empty tracks here. If I was to right click and then remove excess tracks, see that? It only removes one of the excess tracks versus the previous version. When you right click and choose remove excess tracks, it automatically removes all the excess tracks. And one other cool thing about the timeline, if you go here, so there is this button at the very bottom right corner. When you click on it, it shows you the track size, which allows you to change the layer size. So they have small, like this really small, for a tiny, more clean timeline. So I guess that works great for smaller screens. But if you have a bigger screen, when you'd rather have a bigger layers to be able to see, because the thing is you get to add preset motions, custom animations, so you get to work with keyframes and effects and all that. So it's easier to manage your layers when they're bigger in size. When it comes to the character creator, so we want to animate our character in order to have your character rotate from one angle to another. Let's just choose our first action as happy, for example, and say we want to add a new action, right? So it's going to be happy. I'm going to have him right here. Let's do this on a background just to have some kind of visuals. Let's see about this one. Okay, so let's do that. Resize our character. Say I'm going to have be happy here, and I want to have walk towards the car. I'm going to add another action. So selecting my character, go to the action, add new, and then I'll choose walking. Let's just extend the background. Is going to be walking to the left side, right? The first thing we need to do is to add a rotation, which is a preview animation to change the angle, the way the character is walking. And then we can add other keyframes to have the character walk from one position to another. So this is where the next action starts. Now I'm going to click on add animation. And as you can see, we have a new animation that was not there before. It's called character view. So there's this new animation that is called character view. You click that just like any other property. When you select it, it adds your new keyframes. Well, and same thing with the easing and all that. So we now have two different keyframes. So what you want to do is when you have the new keyframes for the character view, you want to make sure that you have the keyframes selected and then click on the rotate button to get into that's on top of the character to get into the character view mode. And that enables you to rotate your character exactly where you want. But also remember, when working with keyframes, it's similar to the way you're working with the rest of the properties. What you want to do is selecting the second keyframe. And then from here, we can rotate them in the right direction, walking towards the car. That would be my first step, like that. Let's take a look. All right, cool. So yes. So I think I'm going to extend the keyframe just a little bit more. So when he's about to start walking, as we normally would when working with the walking action, right? Is when the character, find a spot where the character is about to move his leg. And I guess it's basically on top of that second keyframe of the character view. At this point, we're going to add a position animation that we are used to, right? So click add animation. Easing is going to be linear for both in and out. Properties position. Now we have our two new keyframes. They're right here. One is on top of the second one. If I drag them away, you can see that, right? But they're right on top of it, so that the action happens instantly right after he turns back to going back to the car. Now, before adjusting the second keyframe of my position animation, as always, I want to move my playhead forward in time to find a spot where he stops walking. So he returns back here. So it looks like just right about here. And I'm going to drag my second keyframe to where that is. And always remember, when your characters are walking forward or backward, you might want to consider a perspective as well. So you can also include scale as part of your animation as well, right? But for this example, I'll just keep it simple. So click on the second keyframe, and I'll just get my character right there. Okay, it looks like I'm going to use scale to make sense. Yeah, better do it that way. So here, I'm going to move him right at the car like this. I think this is just fine right there. And then he's going to turn back here, and then we can add other action. But yeah, this is how you do it. So yeah, let's just press play. Happy. Look at that. Smooth and then he turns back. If we add a new action, let's try that out and see what happens. So add new. Let's go play further down the road and see how do we get the character. So he walked right there. Let's get him to walk to the left side of the screen one more time. We got him to walk there already. So most likely it's going to be another walking action where the next action is about to start, basically where this little square right there. We're going to do the same thing. So our first step would be to click on add animation. Under properties, we will choose character view. And I guess the easing is also going to be linear for both in and out. And we just want to click on the second keyframe and then get into the rotation mode or the character view mode by clicking on the rotation. So we can rotate our character back to where we want to have them. And I want you to be careful because this is where the problem happens, where when you are trying to rotate your character in the right position, by mistake, you may tilt your character up or down. So always be sure that your character's body is standing straight, right? It's like not tilted up or down. So try your best. You may want to zoom in just like I'm doing to make sure that your character is standing straight like that, not tilted up, like leaning towards the right side or to the left side. All right, and let's do that. So here, cool. And at the point where he is starting to walk again, same thing. So it looks like he's starting on the same spot. So we're going to do the same thing. Add animation. It's going to be so linear. I'm sorry, easing is linear. Properties, position. May want to do a little bit of a scale as well. And before adjusting the second keyframe, as always, we move our playhead forward in time. See the spot where he stops walking. Drag our second keyframe right there. And then simply get our character close by, getting him bigger, like this, here. And I think he turns back there. Interesting, okay. Nice. Another tip for different variation would be to, let's say, for example, if you have your character walking across the screen, this is what you can do. The character doesn't always have to be in full body like this while they're walking. You could actually take advantage with different variables to add different ways of using your character in terms of position and scale and all that. That gives more variety to the audience and it makes your videos look more interesting. So sometimes you may want to have your character walk across the screen. Again, you don't have to have the full body of the character shown up on the screen. You can actually scale up the character like this, make the upper part of the body visible, and the rest is just down. And he's still going to look fine, right? So that's just like a closer shot of the character, really close to the camera, right? And it's pretty normal that we only see just the upper part, and the rest is just gone. But it looks great. It's just adding more variables to your audience and it makes your videos more interesting. And it's much better that way than keep using the common way of getting characters to walk from or across the screen. Just always here and here, like moving, like left to right, or it's a typical way. So just try something different like this. And another cool way to make use of, if you're working with a static background like this, just a landscape background like this, here's what you want to do. So let me just set up the walking action for this character. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to set up the position animation right here. Easing is linear, as you already know. Move forward and see where he's about to stop walking. Right there. That's just the second keyframe. All right, so first keyframe, this character is going to start walking from here. All right, and then on the second keyframe, he's going to walk a little bit to the left, like that. Yeah, it looks pretty cool, but it may be a little bit boring when it comes to the background. So what I wanted to do is to create a bit of motion to the actual scene, making it more interactive and attractive. So how do we do this? With the help of camera animation, right? So here's what we want to do. We're going to go to our components. We drag and drop the camera animation right there. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add a camera animation right here. And forget about the rest of the video, but this is what I'm going to show you. So I have my character. I'm going to have my frame. The starting point of my camera animation is this. Yeah, the character is pretty big, so let's try this on a smaller scale of our character to show you what it really looks like. So let's do scale. Yeah, something like this. So we have enough space to. All right, camera animation right there, starting point. So we can see more of his body right there. And what I simply want to do is I want to make the camera follow along the guy while he's walking from one place to another to create that motion on the background, making it look natural when you're watching it, right? Instead of just having a character walking across the screen with a static background. It does look unrealistic though. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll set up the second keyframe for the camera animation like this, extend it a little bit more. And I'm going to turn this on to choose the easing as linear or both. Okay, move my playhead after the instance as we all know. Adjust the camera frame on the ending point or the second keyframe as well, like this. Yeah, say something like that. So let's take a look. Yep, follow along, perfectly good. So how you can get this, how can you get the camera animation to follow along your character is have your camera start, basically it starts on where the first keyframe is of the of your character, and it basically ends also here on the second keyframe as well. This way, as you can see, the camera is following along this guy. Now let's see this in action. Press play. Here we go. Look at that. Absolutely amazing, right? Going back one more time and play it one more time. Let me actually make this a little bit slower. So I'm going to extend this until here, for example. See where he's about to stop right there, right? I'm going to make this slower. So I'm going to extend the camera animation again to where the second keyframe is at, there. And there you go. Look at that. Right? A lot more engaging, and it looks so incredible.